There are very few games I played as a kid more than Perfect Dark. I loved everything about this game. I replayed the single-player missions over and over, and while GoldenEye is most people's favorite shooter for the N64, Perfect Dark holds that spot for me. To me, Perfect Dark was everything good about GoldenEye, but better. That's why I was so excited to play this game again for this video. It's also why I'm so sad to say that I really can't recommend the N64 version of this game to almost anyone today unless they're really looking for a bit of nostalgia. If you haven't played this game before, I don't think you're going to enjoy this a ton. So I think this game would be tough for new players today for three main reasons. The first issue is the controls, and this is the biggest issue for me. In 2001, Halo released on the original Xbox and set the standard for how first-person shooters controlled on consoles, and basically every game since then has been using the same setup. But Perfect Dark released in 2000, a year before Halo, and on a console whose controller didn't have a second joystick. The controls are very similar to GoldenEye's, although there's even more you can do in this game, so they're even a bit more complicated, but these controls are weird, and they barely made sense on the N64 controller, let alone trying to remap them to a modern Xbox or PlayStation controller. Like, truly, I played countless hours of this game as a kid, but going back to it, it just never felt like riding a bike, and every moment of the game I felt like I was fighting the controls, which sucked. The second issue is performance. To be clear, this is an N64 game, so I'm not mad at the visuals, which I think are pretty stellar, by the way. No, it's the actual performance. The game runs insanely bad. In 2023, shooters basically have to run at 60 FPS, and they get absolutely roasted if they're remotely inconsistent in this manner. Perfect Dark doesn't run at 60 FPS, and I can't even say it runs at 30 FPS. From what I can tell, Perfect Dark is targeting 20 FPS at best, and it very often drops down to the single digits when the action really heats up. Like, truly, it is that bad, and the footage should make that very clear. The last issue is probably the smallest of the three, but it's definitely worth mentioning, and it's the storytelling. There's a good amount of story in this game, especially for a game of the time, but it's tough to watch these days. Like, when you compare this to modern games with how far we've come with storytelling, this just feels of another era. So instead of explaining everything in detail, I'll just show you a supercut of some of my favorite acting moments in this game.
But this is a golden opportunity to show that America has faith in its industries and will back them.
Damn it, man. I say no, and I mean no.
I'm alive! I thought I'd be chopped up like the others by now. What's wrong? I have a headache. And with a head this big, that's no joke.
Let's see how that overconfident thief deals with our gas defense system. She'll think twice before messing with me again. No! That wasn't meant to happen!
So yeah, I don't think the N64 version of this game holds up for anything more than nostalgic purposes, but the good news is that there is another version of this game that completely fixes two of the three problems I've talked about, and turns out to be an absolute blast. So 10 years after Perfect Dark released in 2010, Microsoft, who had previously acquired Rare, who made the original game, they had developer 4J Studios remaster Perfect Dark for the Xbox 360. And thanks to Microsoft's kind of incredible backwards compatibility, you can not only play Perfect Dark on a modern Xbox Series console, but you can buy it as well. It's $9.99 and it's also part of Game Pass. And I'm super happy to report that once I played this remaster, my tone for this video completely changed. So while this doesn't address the story at all, it uses the same voice acting, the same story, same cinematics, same animations, all that's the same, but it does fix the other two big issues with the N64 original. Critically, the Xbox 360 version of this game has modern dual-stick controls, so you'll feel right at home. They do let you go back to the old controls if you want, but, like, seriously, do not use those. The game also completely fixes performance, running at a cool 60 FPS without breaking a sweat. I truly can't express enough how much this changes the experience for me. They combine to make the game just so much more enjoyable. I don't feel like I'm fighting the game at every turn. I feel like these upgrades let me properly experience the game as it was meant to be played, even if it's not completely true to the original. And the gameplay here is pretty excellent, although it's definitely not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and I'm not sitting here telling you that it's perfect. The level design in particular is pretty inconsistent, with some levels that feel really great, and others that feel like they were just kind of randomly generated. Like, some levels feel really well thought out, that kind of walk you through exactly what you need to do and everything makes sense, but others are so twisted and samey looking that it's hard to figure out what the heck you're supposed to even do. That's not terrible on its own, but the problem comes with how random things feel. Very often you'll have absolutely no idea where to go next or what to do, and over the last 20 years, games have found a bunch of clever ways to hint to the player what they should do next, and Perfect Dark basically lacks all of these features. So this means that the first time you play a level, the odds are you're going to struggle and will not complete everything you need to do. You need to play these levels a few times, and eventually you understand what you need to do, and subsequent playthroughs are much faster, much more confident, and they're just a lot more fun, honestly. On the one hand, this can be frustrating, but it also really feels different from most modern shooters, where the only way to really fail a level is to die. You can keep walking forward as long as you can kill everything in sight, and you'll beat the level, but that's not the case in Perfect Dark. Now, 4J Studios also updated the textures as well as some of the in-game models, and I don't think these are straight wins. I think in general the new textures make the game feel less cinematic than before, but the real weirdness comes from the character faces. Joanna in particular is just weird. I don't see why they needed to make her look like a teenager. It's a weird choice. But before we go, I do have one more way to play this game that I need to bring up. I understand that emulation exists, and it's great that it does, but I try to recommend more official ways to play the games that I talk about on this channel. But in this case, if you have a legally acquired ROM, there is a special emulator you can install in Windows, I'll put a link in the description, that lets you play the whole N64 game at 60 FPS and with mouse and keyboard controls. It's quite frankly revelatory. I won't say much more since I think it's pretty self-explanatory from the video, but yeah, you get to play the original N64 graphics with a silky smooth 60 FPS and intuitive mouse and keyboard controls. WASD to move, mouse to aim, R to reload, E to interact with things. It's all here, and it's incredible. Basically, this is what the PC version of the game would have been if it ever released on PC. I'm just going to pause the video right here for a second to note that I just shot the gun out of this guy's hand, and you can do this reliably by just shooting the gun. The bullets will not go through them, it'll knock the gun out of their hands, and the enemies will go run to try to grab them. It's super awesome this happens, I had to call it out, and yeah, this is really cool. And that's all I have to say about Perfect Dark. I think the game was excellent when it originally released in 2000, but time has not been very kind to it. Thankfully, I think this is a great example of how remasters and the modding community can help old games remain fun and playable for many years to come. Thank you so much for watching.